Dark Souls or Elden Ring?
Oh, okay. Never played Dark Souls, but I played Elden Ring, so I guess I have to go with Elden Ring. But I do know, that that's all connected, and I've dug deep into the history of those games because I played Elden Ring last year. I as I get older, every year, sadly, I'm less and less interested in playing video games, and that's no judgment on anyone else. It's more of just like I just notice the desire is like not there when I think it is. Like I'll try to sit down and play a new game, and I'm like, and I just can't. So Elden Ring was the last one I actually played, which was last year, and I got decently far and I stopped. But Dark Souls, I never played Dark Souls, but I played Bloodborne, and I almost ripped my hair out because Bloodborne was so hard, and I was like, and that was my first exposure to the whole Dark Souls universe, and Bloodborne is so hard. Have you played those games?
No, I haven't properly played video games for like 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. See, I do it. I used to do it. Well, I sort of still do it, I guess. Like once a year, I have my rally of video games for like a month. I just play a couple nights a week, and it's usually around Christmas. Because I'm a school teacher part time during the day. It's part of what I do, and I teach music and theory and stuff. Anyway, so they're on break. So and I usually have a lot of the month of January off, and so it's kind of like my chill out kind of period. Anyway, so that's usually when I play. But I tried playing Bloodborne, and it's outrageously hard. And I found out that like that's the point. It's like you have to be very strategic, and there's like tricks like the rolls, like there's like you duck and roll basically, and that's like the whole, like that's most of the game is like ducking and rolling and then getting in a shot and then ducking and rolling and getting in a shot. And that's how Elden Ring was, except Elden Ring was easier. So I guess long story short, I'd have to say Elden Ring only because that's what I've played. And if you haven't played that game, it's just the sheer setting of the game and the look of the game and the cinematography of the game is worth just seeing, because that was half of it, just like moving your character to be able to look at the scenery. It's a really cool game.
Nice.
But that's funny. Who asked that?
That was Martin Miller.
Really?
Yeah.
Funny. Okay, so Martin's on here. Nice.
Yeah, he was the last one. So it's not much of a spoiler because he will have just been out. So he was the last one.
That's awesome. I'll have to listen to that one because I've never actually met Martin, but we have mutual friends, a lot of mutual friends. I think we follow each other on Instagram. That's about it as far as that relationship, but he's a killer player. I love his playing. I really like Martin's playing. He's a monster.
Give me one sec. I'm literally just going to turn this light on behind me. I realised I missed out on the key mood lighting because 2 in the afternoon for me, it doesn't prompt me to turn on. Give me like 2 seconds. There we go. I look a bit more in front of it now.
My mood lighting this is a little bit of daylight, but when I first sat down here earlier, I had some mood lighting because the sun just rose. So
yeah, what's it called again? The morning, the golden hour, is that what they call it?
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
I think it's when Al goes on the roof and does his videos.
Dude, yeah, man, that guy's a nut. Me and Dal are good buddies. I actually just talked to him for like 3 hours and we drank bourbon. No, I did. He drank wine, but we got drunk over a chat, video chat, and it was a lot of fun. It's good to catch up with him.
Do you feel like, because obviously a lot of what I've seen of you is kind of interacting with the online world, with whether it be like teaching and stuff like that. But on a different level when it comes to like interact, like you're saying, getting drunk over a Zoom call or whatever, stuff like that. Do you enjoy that kind of, do you still feel like you get that connection out of the online, just online being, if you like?
Yeah. It's weird because I've listened to this a lot. I listened to a podcast with what the hell is his name? I should know his name. Mark Zuckerberg. And he was talking about how the metaverse is going to change because you actually be in person and it's different than on, camera like this. And I don't know, man. I feel I still get the same, like, I don't want to, high is the wrong word, but that same like good feeling of hanging out with someone, even if it's over something like this. It's obviously not like at a bar having drinks, which is funny enough, one of those weirdly enjoyable things that it's like, oh, let's hang out, but let's not drink on my couch. Let's drink at this bar where we'll pay for stuff and it will be more fun. Something about that is more fun. But I've done that. I have a buddy from Tokyo and we have done that a few times and it's been great. It's great to catch up and have some drinks and talk. I mean, I do it with my parents a couple times a month, same thing. I'll call them like early on a Friday or Saturday night and we're on FaceTime and, having beers for like an hour, just talking. Cause I live like 4 hours from them. So I don't know. It's definitely not, I wouldn't say it replaces the in-person thing, of course, but I realize I do get enjoyment out of it. And even with the, like I try to do live streams and try to interact with my audience that way because I'm bad at answering comments. And mainly because I want to avoid the comment section altogether. But so I use the live stream to answer questions. Answer questions. And I enjoy that too. It's really fun interacting, even if it's through text and then talking back. And, I get a lot of enjoyment out of just, chatting with people anyway. That's kind of why I'm a teacher. It's fun for me to sit in front of a class and explain things or one-on-one with a student, depending on if they're interested or not. If ones that aren't interested are really, it's really not fun when you're doing a one-on-one and they're just like, ugh. And which doesn't happen with adults, happens with kids.
I've had a few because I teach guitar as well. That's my my full-time gig. So nice. I can relate on the. There's someone asked me, do you prefer teaching certain levels? And I said I really don't kind of particularly care as long as they're invested.
Oh yeah,
I have had certainly beginner students that are far more interested than some of the advanced ones, and vice versa. I've had beginners who you'd think would be like really trying to get into it who just aren't that interested but sort of still turn up each week, and then the advanced ones who are like doing this crazy new stuff every week. So what is there anything about you, because I think there are a lot of musicians that have absolutely zero interest in teaching and sort of putting forward the information that they learn. Is there anything about you as a person that you think drives you towards that?
I don't know. I think it's a few things. I think I've always felt comfortable like talking, as far as teaching a class, I've always felt comfortable talking in front of a crowd. It felt very familiar when I first started teaching classes. And yeah, I don't know. Now I just kind of blanked. But I guess as far as, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm like blanking all of a sudden.
That's a good.
Coffee's kicking in.
I know it's a weird. It's something that I kind of. I felt like I got into almost not by necessity because I didn't. It's not like I have to do it, but I remember as I was finishing up at university. Do you guys? If I said uni, would you know what I was saying? Obviously, now I've said university. Yeah. But I don't know because I feel like you guys.
I have British friends. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. Because when I was finishing up there, it was sort of the end of the COVID sort of. Oh no, it was like beginning of COVID. Sorry. So everything was locked down, and I had a part-time bar job, so I could just like start the teaching online. Start getting students online. And not have to worry about going into work, it's like part-time or anything. So it's quite a nice handy changeover. But I remember at first I kind of thought, well, I'll do this because I guess I can earn more money doing it, and it is doing the guitar. The dream for me is still, playing, performing music, all that kind of stuff. And this podcast has kind of become part of it as well.
Yeah.
But now I do enjoy it more, and I can see myself doing it as part of a holistic kind of career, whether I'd want to do it like full time the whole time, I don't think so, but I want it to be a big part of, you know, and I think being realistic, you know, there aren't many people that just go around, tour the world, go home and play guitar and then that's it, you know.
Exactly. I know why I blanked now, because I was trying to think of something I was going to say, and then I couldn't think of what I was going to say, and then I totally blanked. It was, I suppose it was very intentional to teach. When I was in college, I had to do some presentations, and I had a specific instructor, a specific professor who was like, "You have a knack for this. You'd be really good at teaching," and that kind of stuck with me. And that was very, very early on in kind of my college career, because I went to a community college. I don't know if you're familiar with the difference here. Community college as opposed to like a 4-year. Community college is like, you know, a 2-year degree, much shorter and typically very broad. Lots of different majors you can do, and then a lot of people do there because it's cheaper, and then they transfer to like a 4-year. And that's what I did. I went to the community college. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I just went into their music program, got a lot of like all the gen eds out of the way. But anyway, a teacher there had said that, and I really looked up to her, and she was like, "You have a knack for teaching, so something to consider," because this was really great. One of the presentations I did. And so it always stuck with me. I mean, I went to music school after that, and the whole goal was like, I mean, in my head before that, the idea of music school was to go to music school, learn as much as I can, and then go to LA or Nashville. But I think that interaction with that teacher and a little bit of my parents, I was, all right, go to music school, make music my career in some capacity, in whatever that may be. And whatever that can be, I don't want to do anything outside of music. It has to be music related. So that kind of opened the doors for a lot of different options, and teaching became just a natural thing. When I was in college, that's what I did for extra money. I gigged and I taught lessons when I was at music school. And then when I graduated, one of the teachers at the college actually, like not too long after he left the college, and then the head of the department called me to replace him, to teach at the college, so that it just kind of naturally just kept happening, where it was like, got some nice feedback early on, did school, right out of school, was asked to come teach back at the college I went to. So I was like, oh, I'm going to continue this teaching thing. So and I always thought that, like, if I could get a really great teaching job, then I'll do that. If I could get a really good gig, or if I didn't get a good teaching job in town, I would move and start trying to do the gigging thing. Because I had a lot of friends who were in LA and in Nashville, and I had some connections there. And it would have been the time to do it, because once I did the college thing, the college thing kind of took over. It became the job that I was doing, and to let that go and try to pursue and start over somewhere else, it seemed kind of off the table. And besides, at the point, like, having that under my belt of like being a college instructor felt very, it felt like a little bit of notoriety, I guess. Like, I'm like, that guy in town. There were only, that school had 6-7 guitar instructors, part of the guitar program. And then there weren't any other schools like that, besides like state schools that have like 1 or 2 private guitar teachers at the school. So it was a very cool job to have. And then that kind of just led me down the teaching thing, which then just evolved. And the online stuff, I always did the teaching stuff behind closed doors. So I would teach for like infiniteguitar.com, or I would try to teach for like other online places, and I would try to get students through my playing. So Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff, up until it's almost 2023. So 2022, like the very beginning of 2022, end of 2021, up until that point, I was only sharing my guitar playing. And every once in a while, I'd throw in a little lesson. And then this past year, you're mid 30s, and you start to question everything you're doing if it's not really going the way you want it to be going. And I kind of realized that, the college was gone, and so I'm not doing that anymore. And like last year, I was like, oh, things aren't really going exactly the way I would like these things to be going. And then I had this kind of like, you know, I teach guitar. That's what I do for a living. Like, why am I not sharing this stuff? I share it. I teach at an arts high school now. And I had this, not epiphany, but this kind of thought of like, okay, at the college, I was providing a paid service because these people were coming in paying. At a high school, that's a public high school. It's a private public. It's not private, but it's a public high school. Anyone can get in, and it's funded by the state, but like it's a conservatory. So it's kind of a weird place. But I had this realization of like, I was giving these kids like all the knowledge and all the goods. Like I was teaching them anything that I would teach someone who pays like top dollar. And I was like, in my brain, I'm thinking, I'm giving it to these kids for free, essentially, because they're not paying for this. Like it's public high school. They're not being charged that much. Their parents aren't. And I started to think like, if I can freely give it to these kids who kind of care, some of them don't really care. I was like, why don't I just, there's a, guy in whatever, Cincinnati, who's like loves playing guitar and could really use the same advice. I'm giving it to these kids for free. I should just be giving this to everyone and see how it goes. And it was more or less like I'm just going to start giving away this stuff for free. I listen to a lot of different podcasts of like successful business people. And one thing that they talk about is like, give away what you can give away, and it creates trust with your audience. And then they'll kind of believe in you, and they'll be appreciative of you. And then they'll start to kind of, trust in you as that kind of guiding light and helpful person to maybe, buy from in the future or help out in the future. So like, who would have thought that, providing free lessons, then I get all these people who want to take lessons from me, as opposed to like, I would post myself playing and I'd be like, why aren't people wanting lessons with me? Like for playing. And I played this off. I made this really cool solo. Or I made this album or whatever. And it's weird that no one wants lessons. And then I teach someone how to, I show someone like, here's how to bend this note. And I do a bunch of simple videos just on basic stuff. I do a mixture. And then now, I get all the signups that I want. And it's really weird. And another thing you were talking about was like preference of beginner, intermediate, or advanced. And yeah, I don't think I have a preference. I think that intermediate to advanced, like that in between, like where there's so many aha moments, I think happen a lot in that intermediate phase. And I like that a lot. Sometimes you get some advanced people, and it depending on how advanced they are and depending on their demeanor and their personality, it can be really hard to give them new material because they kind of already know it, but they don't really know it as good as they should know it. And depending on how their temperament, they might be like, oh yeah, I know this. Wait, that's what you're doing? Oh yeah, I mean, I know how to use that. I just don't really use it that much, but I know how to do it. And it's like, what? Well, then use it the way I'm showing you how to use it. And we can talk about different exercises for that. So sometimes advanced students can be difficult. Sometimes they can be great because it just depends on their demeanor and their personality type, because they could be like, oh, sweet. Yeah, I'm going to do that. And then they just go to town with it, and they go to the woodshed and did practice. But I do find that with intermediate players, you get more aha moments, and I really like the aha moments. And I am noticing too, because I present my personality on my videos at all times, I end up attracting people with similar personalities as students, which is really nice, because then it's just an easy jive. Like everyone you just get along, and it's really easy just to go through stuff, and there's none of those question mark moments. Cause I don't know if you've had those, but like you'll get someone who is like a kind of a very different personality type than your own. And you're like, is this person, are they learning stuff from me? Like, I can't tell, like, are they getting anything out of this? Or are they just sitting there thinking like, yeah, whatever, this fucking guy.
I think it's funny. I've talked to a few people on the podcast about like imposter syndrome and stuff like that, and I realized I've said a few times on the podcast that like I don't really get that. Like I understand what it is. I understand why people get it, but it doesn't really. I don't really feel like I get it. But I was thinking about it actually quite often. So I teach probably like 25 to 30, some more regular than others, and I realise quite often I'm sat there thinking like, oh, when are they going to stop lessons? Surely they're going to stop lessons soon. Like I'm sometimes surprised that they pay for the next pack of 5 lessons, and I'm like, actually, I need to just have a bit of faith. I've been teaching this person for like a year and a half, I'm sure they're not just going to, and I mean, even if they do quit, it's no reflection of, if they've been doing it for that long. But it's interesting, I was going to point out myself how you were saying, it's useful that you've obviously, by putting out, you attract in what you put out in terms of content. If you put your personality out there, what comes back is your a reflection of your personality, and it's cool that you've managed to attract people, like you said, that just sort of I guess gel with you in the right way through putting out content that is kind of true to you, I guess. But how do you that was actually what I was going to ask. I was going to say, you were talking about having a bit of a sort of, not crisis, I don't know if that's maybe the right word, but sort of saying, what am I doing kind of thing. It's funny because obviously I'm 25 currently, and I think that's often, I think there'll be a lot of younger musicians thinking, I'm not saying you're old, but like a lot of musicians in the sort of early 20s,
I have
for
a lot
example.
of grey in here though.
My girlfriend just points out the odd like white hair that I have in my head. I'm like, leave me alone. No, I don't want to know about it.
I got a lot of them. You should see me with my hat off. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, obviously it's a thing where I think a lot of young musicians almost have this idea that you just have it figured out by a certain point, whenever that might be, So I think it's almost a little reassuring to hear that. I find it a little reassuring, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of people that do, to hear that you do still have those moments sometimes of like, oh, what am I doing? Like, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I want to do?
Yeah, I think it's a constant. You're constantly refining yourself, and I think that's the whole idea with growing as a person. And if you're not doing that on a consistent basis, you're not really growing. And I don't like I get these feelings because I don't like to feel complacent and in the same situation. I like to be growing my career and making things happen. And in 2018, I actually had to kind of like restart my entire life. So at 29, 30, something like that, I had to completely start over. I mean, the college that I worked at was a private college. There was some bad ownership, and they fucked up the sale of the college, and then the buyer backed out, and then the college immediately went under within a week. And so like hundreds and hundreds of employees, hundreds of students were just dropped. And that happened in late 2017. And then I went through another series of like personal stuff in my life, breakups and stuff and things like that all happened at the same time. It was like one of those when it rains, it pours years. And essentially I had to start over at 30, like literally start everything over at 30. And so, things happen, and, this happens to a lot of people. They lose their job. They lose a loved one or something, and then they really just have to start over. And I think being able to power through those things and then go, all right, now I got to pick stuff up and then keep on trucking and try to figure out how this is going to happen. And, these things lead to other things. I thought I had the coolest job in the world teaching at the college. And now I teach at this arts high school that pays way more than the college, which is so weird. And I found I even get more personal fulfillment out of helping these kids because I feel responsible for them. It's different when you have an adult come in, and I will say it's an easier interaction with an adult. Like at a college, I could, if they were acting up or being idiots in class, I could be like, get the fuck out. But at the high school, I can't do that. I have to be like, what's going on? Okay, let's work on this. Let's make sure you're like, that's fine, and like actually be more supportive. Not that I wasn't supportive at the college. I was. It was just, if someone was being an ass, I had more of an opportunity just to be like, dude, you're an adult, get out. Whereas with the high school kids, it's more a helpful thing. So, so things evolve and change. And, without that experience, I wouldn't be at the high school, which is a small part of what I do, but I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's not much of my day to day. And, but I started a business. I started an in-home lessons company in town. I never would have done that. I doubled my rates at that moment too. Never would have done that. Then that slowly, builds year after year. First year started the business. And this is at 30. First year started the business. Second year started teaching at the music school. This is an arts high school. So I started teaching like music theory and jazz ensembles and stuff like that. So essentially just hands-on, music related classes. And then from there, excuse me. Then from there, then it was COVID. So
strong start.
Year 3, COVID hits. And then, I think everyone kind of took a break in 2020, whether you trucked through or whatever. I felt like I felt like I continued to work and make stuff happen, but not in a progressing way. I felt like I really just like buckled down and tried to weather the storm in 2020. I had a lot of work. So I did actually have a lot of work. I ended up having to do a lot of stuff at the high school, which was great, but I felt like I didn't really progress much that year outside of like, I guess, in the way I would have liked to. It was just like working and making money, which is good. Right. It's great. But I didn't feel like I was moving my career along in a good way. And that's the wrong word. I wasn't like progressing my career along. It was just, I was doing the work that was that needed it done right at that moment. And then 2021 hit, and then I kind of picked it back up and released an album. And then, after the album was released, that was kind of more when like released the album, made some videos. And I was like, God, I really hate making these videos. Like I hate like trying to perfect these guitar videos and spending so much time. And then like, doesn't seem like people really care that much. Not that they don't, but I was like, and there's so many other guys doing this. So many guys, so many great players recording themselves online playing guitar. And I was like, how am I going to compete? I can't really compete. Like even these guys 10 years younger than me are playing, we're playing at the same, like we're all at this crazy level. And it's like, I need to differentiate myself in some way because I don't have any groundbreaking parts. I'm not a groundbreaking player. I strive to be well-rounded. I have the things that I enjoy doing more, and I think I've developed more. But like I try to be a well-rounded player. That's comes from the schooling of going to music school is like be a well-rounded player. And I want to do a little bit of everything. And so I just had this realization of like, I don't know if I can really compete in this guitar playing sphere anymore. In a tangible way to like, I'm not going to be Tosin. I'm not going to be like any of these like people, or I'm not going to be Pliny. I'm not going to be these people. And then I just was, at the same time, it was like, you teach for a living, man. You always have. Like, that's been my career for my entire music career has been focused around teaching. Right after college, started teaching at a college. That college went away within a year and a half. I was now then at another music school, like a arts high school. So then it was just like, kind of like, this just needs to happen. I need to shift, my social media presence and all that stuff needs to be focused more on teaching. Because that's where the long-term stuff for me exists. Like that's where the long-term goals can be achieved. That's where the I guess success or that's not the word I'm looking for. The sustainability and enjoyment and all that good stuff I think comes from that, because the feedback from the lesson stuff is so much more so where I feel like I'm affecting people more like in a positive way, as opposed to like when I release music, people be like, you're great. And I never really felt good from compliments about my playing. I always was like, cool. Like it's really weird. Like I do not take compliments well, in the sense that like it's almost like I don't believe them. It's like if someone was like, hi, like, hey, like that's how I feel when someone gives me a compliment about my playing. I'm just like, sweet, thanks, man. And then I don't really think anything beyond that. But when someone's like, that lesson really helped me, that was really great, I love the way that broke down, I'm like, sweet, like that's great. Like I'm so happy that helped you. Because that light bulb thing, I think affecting people, I realized it's weird. It's weird, like how you can feel have that kind of shift. Because like I get more enjoyment out of seeing someone else get enjoyment than like someone giving me a nice compliment. Maybe it's because I feel like I all guitar. I feel like we all feel like we suck. Like even the best players, like I'm not that good. And so when someone says a nice comment, I'm like, yeah, I'm not that good.
It's the automatic response, isn't it? Just like, well, I messed up that bit,
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think, why. Whereas when someone says something helped them, I'm like, it did? Sweet. That's great. And I mean, the stuff I'm teaching is not anything new. It's a lot of stuff that a lot of people teach. It's just, I just try my best to break it down in a way that people can understand it and make sense of it, as opposed to like just sharing the information. So I don't know. I went on a little rant there.
So good. That's what the whole thing's for. Yeah,
right.
I think there's some space to be found within the writing of music for musicians, in giving within music, writing, because let's face it, a lot of musicians, myself included, write music quite selfishly, write it because we want to show the world, this is me, this is what I create, here's a really cool thing that I've done, and actually I think there's two things. I think one, it's about obviously writing for yourself. You've got to write what you like as a songwriter, but also
be true to yourself, and like it's got to reflect you in some capacity. I think. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say. I think I like the idea of writing, trying to write something that will give something to someone. A sense of meaning in some way or another, and I think that gives you a greater. Sort of a greater why behind why maybe you're putting the music together. Because if you're just writing it selfishly for yourself, not selfishly, that sounds kind of quite critical, but if you're writing it maybe to deliver some sort of good to the world, by helping people or making them think in some way or other, it kind of gives you maybe a bit of a higher purpose without sounding all sort of almost religious,
Yeah, totally. I think I've thought about that a lot recently, actually, of like, how, because I still want to write music and make music. And I have a project with my buddy, Charlie Engen, who's a drummer from here. He plays drums for Five Finger Death Punch right now.
Awesome band.
But he's been a good friend of mine for a long time, since college, because we're both from this area. And we talked recently. He's like, I really want to release some singles with Ideology, which is a band of ours. And we kind of both came to the conclusion of like, we were this progressive metal band. We were writing these really like long, like through composed things of like, here's a riff expanding into that one, expanding into that one. And it's like this like nerdy like stuff. And I was like, should we just do like, I feel like people are going to get more enjoyment out of, we need to do the form, like the verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus thing. Like, can we just do that for these now? And I was like, not only does it take me so long to make those compositions and those arrangements, but like it just feels like it falls flat sometimes because it's made for a very specific type of person. And not that, I mean, I love that style though. That's why I like to write it like that. But that's like me. I love to do this like this. So I'm going to do it like this. Here you go. And then people are like, oh, there are certain people who are this is a really cool arrangement. And then a lot of people are like, where's the thing I can latch on to? Like that thing that happened earlier. I love that. And I haven't heard it since. Why didn't it come back? And, I think about that as a little bit of like, let's write something for the audience as opposed to just for ourselves. Like, obviously I'm going to play riffs that I like and that I've made, and I'm going to write chord progressions that I like and that I've made. But I think some of the simplest things that we're going to try to do is just like, even just cater to the familiarity form that people are used to. Like, we can have these riffs that come back that we wouldn't have normally done because of being like that progressive metal thing. Like, our forms were very, very much more like, almost like Between the Buried and Me, where it was like thing, and then maybe at the end first thing comes back. We weren't that complex as them, but I guess a little bit more melodic in a sense. And I love Between the Buried and Me. Yeah.
Let's put this out as your hit piece for them.
What's up?
Put this out as your Between the Buried and Me hit piece.
Yeah. and I'm not saying anything against that form at all. It's just for like they do that, and it's like that's why people love Between the Buried and Me, like because of that way the form is. If they did if they switched to doing like verse chorus bridge, people are like, what the fuck? It'd be a different band. It wouldn't be the same band. And they've developed it over time, and I feel like there's limited space maybe for that stuff, but I don't know, because right now that seems to be what a lot of people are doing. It's funny how things shift. It was always, I don't want to do the verse chorus thing because that's what everyone does. And now I feel like everyone has shifted and not done that and kind of done this through compose thing, mashing of riffs together and cool soloing and crazy stuff. But then at the end of the song, you're like, I forgot what happened, like as a listener. And it depends on like the way it's presented. But I have found that with certain artists, even if they're great, like newer guitar players or something, I'll be like, I forgot what happened by the end of that song. As opposed to like if someone has a hook or a verse or a chorus, I'm like, oh, that's a really cool part. I like that. That's back. And I recognize that. Like you look like Aaron Marshall's a good example, like intervals. Like that's why people love his stuff, because it's like there's the melody again, and that melody's fucking awesome, and he phrased it so cool. But like again, to each their own. And there's people who fit in that sphere that provide a certain thing that I just think in certain situations can be difficult. And I'm ranting again. And my opinion is my opinion. So it's not that any of that stuff is wrong or right. It's just things I've thought about in my own compositions to maybe cater towards creating things that people can latch on to a little bit more, mainly for the reason of their enjoyment. To tie that back into what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, I spoke to Jack Gardner recently, and he was talking
Jack.
about,
Me and Jack are buds too.
Yeah, and I was talking about how melody is. Well, he was talking about how melody is really so important, and you can dress it up with all these fancy chords to give it its own sort of sparkly kind of flavor, whatever you want. But if you're not actually hooking people in, it maybe isn't. Maybe it's not doing what deep down what actually you feel like maybe it should be doing. I mean, there's no should really, is there? Like you can, like you said, you can do what you want, your opinion's sort of your own. But I don't know. I think, if you were to focus more on that idea of giving music in that sense, maybe some of those techie ideas go. I remember that I was going to say, I was writing a thing not so long ago, and I put together this quite complex finger style sort of part where there were different rhythms. Like it was kind of a polyrhythmic thing, but then like it would change up in places, and it took me ages to put together. And then I got to the end of it, and I just strummed through the chords with some open strings behind it. I was like, oh shit, that's so much better. Like like I genuinely, I think I probably went through 20 to 30 slightly different versions before I got to the end one. The one I liked. Yeah. And it's still technically in the demo right now, but I don't think it's going to stay. And then I just strummed through the chords and I added in some open strings behind because they just happened to work in the key. I was like, that's just better though. That just sounds so much better. And it was so frustrating, but I was just like, I've just got to kill my ego and just accept that that's the better part, Yeah.
And it's a good thing to notice. I do think, sometimes I've had that thing of like trying to force something because you're like, this is cool and I need to put it in this spot. Or you write it and then you put it aside and you're just waiting for like a moment in your writing process where you're like, oh, I can insert that thing. And I noticed a long time ago when I would start to write, I was like, oh, I can't force shit in, because as soon as you force it in, it can like fuck up the rest of the song. Like you force it in, and then then it's like, what do I do after this? And you're like, oh shit, I don't know where to go from there because I don't like the transition out of this or whatever. That's good. It's funny because I've done the same thing. I've done the same exact thing many times where it's like, Yeah. I'm just like, oh, fuck. Like, this is better, simpler, as opposed to like this crazy thing I was doing. Every once in a while, like you can throw it in there. Like, there's times where that thing does work where you're like, oh, sweet, here's a spot. Oh, cool. I can get out of it really easy. Awesome. Included this cool part. Because I've literally worked my ass off on parts, put it in the song, and then listened back and then gone through and highlighted everything and then press delete and then push the other part in to match him. Like, that works better.
I feel there's a metaphor for life in there that I can't quite figure out, but I don't know what that would be. But yeah, there is something depressing about just taking all those chunks and going, or just having all these chunks on your like Logic or whatever you use, and then just looking at it all, just pressing X. It says, do you want to save? And you just go, no.
I think, it's what it is like, you don't know until you try. There's this idea of like, you can go down the wrong path and try a lot of things and continue down that wrong path. And until you realize like, this is the wrong path, you can't like turn and go down the right one. So you can head down the wrong path and put a lot of work into the wrong path before you figure out that it's wrong. And I think that happens all the time in many facets of life, of like, think about a relationship. Like you date someone for a while and you're like, maybe a year and you're like, this is wrong. And then you like start over and have, you know what I'm saying? Or like a job, same thing. You'd be like, this is not good. I have to get out of this. I just spent 2 years of my life in this job that I hate, whatever. I think it's noticing that stuff and fixing it, rather than just being like, nope, I've made the decision to use this. I'm going to use it. And then later being like, still don't like the way that sounds.
Yeah, but at least I've got it.
It's finite. But again, even if you would have completed it and been like, damn it, I wish I would have done that different. Well, there's always the next song or the next album. And because I have that with my own album where it's like, the very last steps, I was like, I don't like some stuff happened where now all of a sudden it's just brighter than I wanted, and the cymbals are higher than I wanted, and but it's done and it's out and it's out. So now I listen back and I'm like, cymbals are too hot, cymbals are too hot, cymbals are too hot. Every time I listen to this song, cymbals are too hot, cymbals are too hot. And that was not like that at one moment, and now it is. But it's like, whatever, I'll do another one. I don't think the cymbals being a little less hot was the difference between thousands of listens on Spotify to millions of listens on Spotify.
You never know. It might just be people listening going, nah. Yeah, I always listen to old Cowboys from Hell. That first album. The album's called Cowboys from Hell, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was checking myself for a second, and I feel like the cymbals are really, really like hissy. They're just very like the whole way through, and I just can't. I love the album, so it doesn't stop me. But genuinely, that's about as close as I get. Where I'm like, I really love these songs, but it just sounds like all the way through.
I get that with a lot of older stuff, especially if I get into it later. You're just like, oh, I love this album. I hate the way that sounds, but it's a great album. I don't know if I can think of any exact examples of that firsthand, like off the top. Oh, like I guess some like old Symphony X. Like I like Symphony X, and some older stuff of theirs. It's like this mix is ass, or like the guitar tone, the rhythm guitar tone is like really bizarre or something. But it's like this. But the album's sick. Like listen to Michael Romeo play. Like, and it's not everything, but like, and I think most of the time for me with that, it's being spoiled with modern mixes. You get spoiled with, listen to like Periphery or something, this pristine, nice, awesome mix that's like peak everything and it's all clear and you can hear everything perfect, and you're just like, oh, how do I do that? Or insert band that you like the mixes of. I always thought Periphery did a really great job over their past how many albums, especially since Periphery 2. I always really liked their mixes, or like Devin Townsend. I like Devins are different, but some of his old stuff, there's old ones where it's like, that is blatantly fake drums, like on some of his older stuff. but it's like great. Like this first Ziltoid, like blatantly fake drums, and it's a Ziltoid, so I mean you can't really take it, you know, too seriously in the sense of like it's meant to be kind of a joke while being entertaining. I love Devin, by the way, but then his newer stuff has like outrageously good mixes, and he's a great producer. But yeah, I think it comes with the dating of things. You know, it's not as it wasn't as consistent back then. And now I feel like everyone's got it kind of almost down to a science where like a lot of modern metal stuff has very similar mixes, which I don't dislike, but it spoils us, I think, when we listen to older stuff.
I know what you mean. Going back to Dimebag again, I love his tone, because a lot of people are like, oh, I hate, his rubbish tone. It's like it's all, it's just too high gain and it's all just like solid state amps. And I'm like, well, I don't know. It did a thing, It's like the same way I kind of like the way Injustice for All sounds. It's just, it does a thing. It's not doing the best thing. Objectively, it probably isn't. But it just has its own character, which I think is really cool. If you listen to like, if you listen to like Vulgar Display of Power, like the guitar tones in there are not what you would place in a modern metal mix. You probably wouldn't even hear it in a modern metal mix, but it just does something really cool. And listening back to like one of my favorite bass tones is Bulls on Parade. Nice. Yeah. It's just such a like, and again, whether that bass tone would work in like a modern metal kind of mix, I don't know. Maybe it would. I don't know. But yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you is I've noticed a lot of guitarists, particularly metal guitarists, tend to have sort of, or metal musicians tend to have, not always, but tend to have a phase where they love metal and then sort of grow out of it. And I find that I meet so many like jazz or like soul or maybe funk kind of musicians that you ask them about metal and they'll reference like Meshuggah songs and stuff, and you're like, oh, you used to like that stuff. So I guess my question is, why do you think metal guitarists or just musicians in general have this sort of tendency to branch away from it at a certain point? Do you think it's maybe the technicality that we were talking about earlier? I still love metal for the record.
What's up?
I still love metal for the record. That's still my go-to.
Oh yeah. No, I don't. So I think it could be a number of things. Like for me, I guess I could just tell you why it shifted for me. I never disliked or started disliking metal. I mean, I've always been a big metalhead. I started with metal. Like my brother played guitar, my dad played guitar. And my brother's 6 years older, and my dad used to gig. So growing up, it was like my dad was like AC/DC and Dewey Brothers and like a bunch of classic rock stuff, Santana, all that stuff. So that was just always playing. But my brother was into like Pantera and Metallica and stuff like that. So, I remember him being like, you need to learn how to play Walk. Like if I Pantera, I was like, okay. And so I used to learn. So that was a huge influence. And then my best friend played bass, and he was a huge metalhead. So I just, started with metal, Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, lots of Metallica. I was a big Metallica fan growing up. And not so much the other two, a little bit of Pantera, but then like got into like kind of the stuff that was popular at the time, like Static X and Slipknot and Mudvayne were just all fresh new bands. I was huge into that stuff. But anyway, yeah, so I was big into that. I played metal bands. And that was the thing I was going to do. I was going to play in touring metal bands, and I had an offer to relocate to Dayton, Ohio to join this metal band. And instead I went to college, because I took a year off. What do you guys call that? Gap year?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which isn't really a thing here. I think it's becoming more normalized, but I did one, because I wasn't sure what the hell I wanted to do. So I took a gap year and then almost went to playing this metal band in Ohio, and then decided against it and went to college instead, which is neither one I don't think was right or wrong for people who have the same dilemma. But when I went to college, I made a conscious decision to I felt like I was missing a lot in my playing. I felt like there was so many gaps as far as, and I felt like blues and jazz fusion was the answer. So I was like, I need to learn how to do those things and those specific things. Like I wanted to know how to play blues properly. I wanted to know how to play jazz and jazz fusion. I was a huge jazz fusion fan in those days. Like, you know, my first guitar teacher ever was when I got into college. I was self-taught until then. And he was like, here's Al Di Meola. And here's, you know, insert all these other guitar players. I mean, I was familiar with like the guys I found on my own, like Vi and Paul Gilbert and Petrucci, but that's because they're in the metal sphere. So I knew them, and that's who I idolized. And I was like, I want to play like them. And they have influences from fusion guys and jazz guys, and blues guys. So like, I need to learn how they learned. And so I just shifted into that stuff. And then in college, I started to realize that I really enjoyed a lot of that playing. I really enjoyed, you know, a lot of jazz fusion stuff, Chick Corea, and I enjoyed a lot of. I started to get into more jazz guitar players, and like really enjoyed Mike Stern and John Scofield. And then, you know, I started to enjoy a lot of blues stuff, like straight ahead blues, especially guys who had a little more of a jazz influence, like Robin Ford. And I just realized that I really liked this stuff, and I really liked the way that the things it portrayed. Like, you know, John Scofield really sits behind the beat, and I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to emulate that. And then that just expanded into making friends who already were into that stuff, like, and not metalheads. And then I became friends with people that were doing that, and then they would introduce me to like other stuff. So getting introduced to R&B stuff and hip hop and things like that, and realizing like, oh, this, you know, the thing to like about this is like that really behind, like it's not so on top, like in your face. It's like more groove oriented, and it's really fun to improvise in these settings, which was a huge thing I realized I enjoyed, was improvisation. I really enjoyed that in college. I still do. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's one of my favorite things. It's what I practice half the time, being able to improvise in these settings. And so for me, it wasn't that I ever was like, stop liking metal, because all that time I was still like, you know, I would say I really stopped listening to metal probably for like a year, maybe like a year. I was just like really delved into that stuff. And then, you know, that's a pretty common story for a lot of people. Like I met friends who were like, I'm a metalhead, but I really want to get good at jazz. And then that same friend would be like, have you heard this band called Animals as Leaders? That was when the first album came out when I was in college. And I was like, no. And then he shows me, and it's got that intro of the album. And then the drums come in, and it's huge. And you're like, what the fuck is this? I've never heard anything like this. I don't know if you remember that. You were probably in high school when that came out. But when I first heard that first song from that first Animals as Leaders album, that brought me back into metal. Because I was just like, what? I'd never heard anything like it. And I had listened to Meshuggah, and I had listened to like, you know, kind of like Veil of Maya had been playing kind of similar, genty, I guess you can call it stuff. After the Burial, I'd been listening to them. But Animals releasing that album was like, it sucked me right back into metal. And then I was like, oh, this guy did what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to learn all this jazz fusion harmony and then bring it into metal. And so that brought me back in. I still didn't lose that love for anything else, and I still actually continued. I didn't really shift that much back into metal. I still kept learning fusion, but yeah, I've always been a big metalhead, but like, I also really love, like, my favorite players aren't metal guitar players. My favorite guitar players are like blues and jazz and fusion guys. If I want to learn something new, I don't go and watch a Tosin video. Nothing against that. I really enjoy what he does, but I have no desire to like play in that way. I want to play, like, I hear Robin Ford play, and I'm like, oh, I want to be able to do that. Or I hear, like, even like, I'd say the shreddiest I get, and it's pretty shreddy, is like Guthrie Govan. Like, I hear him and I'm like, that's how I want to play. There's such a meld of blues and jazz and fusion and metal and country in his playing. And that's my ideal way of playing, is something along those lines. But, you know, in the same light, I guess there are some metal players that I do like. I guess I'm an idiot because there are, but like I love Michael Romeo, and I really like Per Nilsson from Scar Symmetry. He's one of my favorite players to listen to. But again, you listen to that guy, especially Per Nilsson, you're like, oh, this guy's a Alan Holdsworth fan. Like it sounds like a jazz fusion metal player, which I think is really cool. Like there's all these like Holdsworth influence things going on. And to me, he plays like, I feel when I listen to this, how he plays and like the way he phrases and the notes he chooses to land on, it's like you're thinking like a jazz musician or a fusion musician, very conscientious of the notes he's landing on, playing the chord changes, but in his own very unique, like awesome ass way. But yeah, no, still like metal. And I just do a lot. I just like everything. Cause like what I do here locally, I don't play any metal locally. I play in one group that is like a 80s tribute thing. And we do some 80s hair metal. That's the closest I get to gigging metal. Otherwise I'm playing like Prince and Michael Jackson and top 40 stuff all the time. So a lot of funky guitar rhythms. And I do that quite often in town. And that's, it kind of comes with the territory of being in Minneapolis, the Prince town. So you get a lot of that style on the gigs, which was a learning curve because I was not a Prince fan growing up. And I had some embarrassing moments early on in my gigging career of like not knowing what Prince song they were talking about. And they were like, how do you not know that song? And I'm like, no, how's it go? Yeah. Anyway.
I feel that way with it's funny because of the sort of generation I'm in, I'm maybe somewhat aware of like old school metal, but there are a lot of people my age where you can reference like an old school metal band and they just won't have any idea what any of the songs are. Like again, I referenced Pantera to the drummer of my old band and he was kind of like, I don't really know any of their stuff. I'm like, what?
Oh yeah.
How? So yeah. But yeah, man, I mean, so I had one thing that I thought would be quite a cool little sort of maybe simple, it'd be as simple as you make it, I guess, question that maybe that anyone could take something away from, any guitarist at least, not anyone, or maybe, depends how interested you are in guitar, but I was going to say, if you could give one tip for a beginner, an intermediate and an advanced player, you've never met them before, you just have to give them, each one of them, like a little soundbite tip of, I don't know you, but this probably is going to help you. What would you pick for each one?
Oh, interesting. Well, I guess it just kind of depends. For beginners, learning songs. I mean, that's what you want to do. A lot of learning songs. I've had beginners come in and be like, I've been running this scale, or I know this, like I've been trying to play my bar chords. I'm like, do you know how to play any songs? They're like, well, not really. I'm like, you need to learn some songs, man. Like you're learning the language then. So like with beginners, learn as many songs as fast as you can, and as fast as you can, but you know what I mean? Like learn as many songs as you can in that first year. Just learn songs and learn songs and learn songs, and don't, and do some of the fundamental stuff. Like you got to learn a variety. I think it's important. I think sit down and learn, a Neil Young song, and then in the same breath, the next day, sit down and learn, a Metallica song, and then learn just any songs you like. Because like for me, it was so helpful to have this broad, interest. When I first started playing, I would learn strummy chord songs on an acoustic, but I would also learn heavy riffs, and I would learn solos, and maybe one of the solo, I would learn like Metallica solo, and then I would learn a Santana solo, or I would learn, a Doobie Brothers funky guitar rhythm, and then I would learn, Cowboys from Hell, or I would learn a drop tuned Static X song, and then I would learn a standard song from Heart, like Barracuda or something. And I think learning a variety and not really and making sure that you're kind of covering the bases in the song. So learn songs that they're providing different things, because you'll learn a lot of the fundamentals. And obviously spending some time for beginners, you got to spend time with being able to switch between chords. That's a huge thing. It's like a really hard thing for beginners, is like switching from one chord to the next chord. So I sat down for like a week and I had this video that my brother bought, and it was about that very thing. And I just did it until I mastered it, and it was hugely helpful. So it can be a pain in the ass because it really takes your time to sit down and specifically focus on being able to play chord changes. So switching from a G to a C to a D to an A and making it seamless. Because, for beginners, that's really difficult sometimes. And so that's a huge thing to spend some time on. So learning songs and get the fundamental ability to change through chords is huge. Intermediate, learn the cage system. Learn and master the caged system, because by that time you understand your chords and you know how to move them around a little bit, but understand where the notes are on the E string and the A string, so you can find any chord you want, and learn basic music theory of like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and where those notes are at. Only on the lower strings. Really, that's all you need if you're an intermediate. I mean, obviously you can move beyond that and really master the caged system. So having an understanding of how the chords and the arpeggios and the pentatonics and the chord scales all interact together, while continuing to learn songs. And then challenging yourself. Intermediates need to challenge themselves, like constantly trying to like set goals of like, that song seems really hard. I don't know if I can play it. Well, just try and then see how it goes. Like how many times, that's how I became, the player I am, is by not really setting limitations. I would remember in my first year, I heard this Lamb of God song and I was like, that sounds insane. I don't know if I can play that, but I'm going to give myself the next year. And this was like a couple months into playing. And then I learned that song within like a month. And it's because I was like, I just made it, I gave myself like permission to try it. And then same thing happened with like learning Steve Vai stuff. I did not allow myself to even touch that stuff. And then one day I was like, I need to learn how to play like this. So I just started learning Steve Vai licks, and I probably played them, crappy or whatever, but I would learn whole Steve Vai tunes, and it was like all these licks, and struggled through it. It took forever, but it changed the way I play, and it was hugely helpful. And then for advanced students, I would say, keep an open mind. You don't know everything, because that's what advanced people do. They get to an advanced level and they're like, I'm pretty good. Act as if you still have lots to learn, because you do. There are many things you can learn. So treat everything you see online as an opportunity to learn, because you could know something that I've never played before. And I'm like, oh, I never thought about doing that. And that's an opportunity to learn and grow, and vice versa. Same thing. There could be something like, I never did that before. I mean, I have me and my buddy in town, he'll be like, what's that thing you did right there? And I'll show it to him. And he's like, I can't do that. That's so weird. Or vice versa. And then, and you work on those things and just try to learn from each other. And for advanced people and for every level is transcription. Learn to transcribe and analyze solos. So not transcription in the way of like writing it down, that you can do that, but learning stuff by ear and then analyzing what's happening. So if you learn a solo, you sit down, you put on one of your favorite guitar players. And, I just did this with a Robin Ford thing. I put on he was just playing through a blues. I put it on. I didn't allow myself to go like, I know that lick. I know that lick. No, I would go, okay, let's see what he did there. He did that. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do know that one. So, I mean, I can use that. Cool. I'll remind myself that is a possibility. And then I'll see something like, oh, he did that like slightly different than I ever would think to do that. And then you're like, what chord is this? Oh, he's playing over that chord. Okay. It's this scale happening over that chord. He's landing on this chord tone. Okay. Logged. Or then you come across a lick where you're like, that was really cool. What the hell was that? And then you learn it. Then you go, okay, what were the chord changes? Or what were the chord? Okay, that was this chord. He was doing this. Okay, it's got this arpeggio in there, but it's also got this scale in there. And then I'm landing on that note. Okay, I'm going to try that in the same situation, put on a backing track, try the same lick, put on the backing track, try the same lick, put on this backing track, expand the lick into something that naturally flows out of it that you would do, or vice versa, coming into the lick. Yeah, and that's what I would say for advanced people. And it just depends on the style of music. I mean, obviously, like that was like a bluesy jazz reference in that light, but you could do the same thing with metal. You know what I mean? Like, you know, learn a Petrucci thing, and then you go like, what the hell was that? And how can I expand that across the fretboard? That could be something, because the metal players are doing a lot of sequential, like sequences stuff. So you could analyze a sequence and then be like, cool, how do I expand that across the fretboard? Okay, I can do that same thing in this area, this area, this area. Now I can play that in every position. So yeah, I think for the advanced thing, it's like, you know, you never know everything, and don't act like you're too good for anything. I mean, I always am like trying to learn in any capacity. And the mistake I made early on when I got good fast was like, I'm pretty good. Like I know that. And then that was just a dumb attitude to have. Anytime I see something, it's like, yeah, I might know that, but like, let's see how that was like executed. Can I execute it in a similar manner, or will I learn something from the way it was executed? Yeah, there's that.
That's good. Yeah, I feel like there's a bit there for everyone. But yeah, there's I mean, we've covered quite a lot of ground, to be fair, from business to music to life and all that. So hopefully
Yeah.
there's some bits, some inspirational bits that different people of a different mix of sort of backgrounds can take from, which is really cool. So if you're cool with that, I can get you to ask your question for the next guest.
Oh yeah.
And also recommend an artist.
I have an artist for sure.
Okay, cool. Most people start with that. I'm starting to think I might need to just get them to do the question then, because I feel like that, although it gives you thinking time, doesn't it? So
Yeah, exactly. So the artist is pretty easy. There's a guitar player from town here that has an amazing band. You've heard of Arch Echo or Arc Echo? I don't know if it's Arch Echo or Arc Echo.
Yeah.
So Adam Rafowitz and Adam Bentley, the other guitar players. Adam Rafowitz is actually from town, from where I'm from, and I met him 5 years ago or something. And he's a phenomenal guitar player, great player. That band is absolutely amazing, and they crush. They've toured with Dream Theater now, and I think they're on a tour. I can't remember who they're with now, but they're like they're doing really great things, and they're a workhorse of a band. Like, they release music all the time, and when you hear the music, you're like, how do you release music this often? And it's not that often. It's like an album a year, but it's like, for the way this band sounds, you're like, that would take me way longer than a year to create that album, because it's so intensely, it's very proggy metal fusion, lots of notes, lots of key changes and rhythm changes and polyrhythms and crazy stuff, but they do it in such a really great way. I really love that band. And Adam Rafowitz is like the, I guess you could say, lead guitar player, because he does a lot of the melodies, but like Bentley also solos and does that stuff too, and he produces that band, and helps in the production of that band and the mixing of that band, and he's great at that stuff too. So both Adams are phenomenal players, and I'll shout out Rafowitz since he's from town here, and great guy and a flawless type player. When you see him live, it's one of those things where it's like, I've seen him play in front of me, and like, I'm like, dude, how are you so clean in this capacity of this song, these songs that are so intense, like just crazy, and you're just like, play it flawless. I don't know. Kid's a nut.
Nice. That's a good. You've really you've given them a good plug there. So
yeah.
Fair play.
And a question for the next person.
Yeah,
Oh Jesus.
start the conversation.
I don't know. Oh, I don't even know. Dude.
Pressure's on.
What do you do to stay motivated? How about that?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll tell you afterwards who the guest is. I think you'll think it's quite a cool one. So I'll tell you who that is afterwards. So because don't want to spoil that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and if you have anything you want to promote or plug, then go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a podcast I'm starting. I've started. I actually just had 2 guests yesterday. Miles Dimitri Baker was on, and I think you know Miles.
Yeah, I had him on. Yeah.
Yeah, me and Miles are buds, and I've known him for a couple of years now. And then my buddy Jake Wilson was on, and I've had Al on. So it's called Creating a Life in Music, and it's all around how to develop a career in music. And then I do that go follow me on Instagram if you want a bunch of free lessons. I do free stuff all the time on Instagram. And actually, if you want some good, I have a bunch of affiliates. You can go to MikeSalow.com and get some discounts on guitar stuff like Guitar Pro and some earplugs and some guitar programs. Go check out Fretboard Biology. That college I taught at was, we took that entire guitar program and digitized it into an online guitar program called Fretboard Biology. And it's super comprehensive and super organized. And it's essentially, it is a college guitar program online, and it's way cheaper, and it takes you through like a college program. It's essentially like built to function on as an online course for a college. So like there are quizzes, there are levels you have to pass before you can get to the next thing, and it's very much everything in order. Like no steps are skipped. So I'd highly recommend going and checking out Fretboard Biology. And there's a discount code on my website on MikeSalow.com that you can find there as well. That'll get you 50% off the first month. But super highly recommend. It's only $29 a month, and it's absurdly affordable to the point where I almost want to tell the owner, like, dude, you got to charge more. Like, this thing is way worth more than $29 a month. But he likes that he's helping people. So and he's the most experienced guitar educator on the planet. He used to run the guitar program at MI in Hollywood for like 20 years or something. But yeah, highly recommend checking out Fretboard Biology. That's my big plug, I guess.
Nice one. Cool. Well, thank you very much. That was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.